Hi, everybody. Welcome to the latest episode of Your Winning Edge, where we have real conversations with SMB sales leaders who carry the number, who make the call, and you have to live with the outcome. I have a special guest today, Chris Lee. Recently, he was the Chief Revenue Officer of Interos AI, but I actually have him on the show today mainly because of where he's been, what he's done, and really where he sees the software SaaS industry or industry in general going now that we have AI. So with that, let me introduce you. Hi, Chris.
Hey, Skip, how are you? Pleasure to see you.
Wow, you make it sound like I'm Joe Rogan, but God bless you. As I mentioned in the opening, your background is really varied. Your background is with a lot of mic drop, very well known SaaS companies and so forth. And so my first question for you is, given your background, which I hope you'll go into a little bit more,
Yeah.
and everybody's talking about how all these companies, these tech companies, are laying off because of AI. So for somebody who's helped build a bunch of these companies, what do you think?
A fantastic question. I've been getting this one over and over again because, here's what's interesting, Skip. I've gone from Siebel Systems, Salesforce.com, DocuSign, all of them pre-IPO. But one of the things that you start to see from a consistency is that with each one of these, there's a bit of a paradigm shift, right? And we're in that stage of another paradigm shift. That shift is going more towards AI. So when I was with Salesforce, prior to that, I was with Siebel Systems. Siebel Systems basically came out and really started to talk more about how do we go from a Rolodex to CRM, then go back into, now I moved to Salesforce, and that shift was into on-demand. And then now on-demand, you're seeing the SaaS world moving into AI. But again, nothing really ever dies. It's always how do you adapt to the new way?
Okay. And so again, you mentioned Siebel. I remember Siebel.
I
Basically,
know.
Siebel is the reason Salesforce exists.
Exactly.
And then you have DocuSign. So as you're generating, and let's just take even your most recent experience, as you're looking at generating revenue, new revenue, retention of revenue, referral revenue, and so on and so forth, what to you then is the number one challenge that all companies have today? Not even AI related, but what's the number one challenge as far as being able to hit the number?
Yeah, the interesting thing is I think all organizations always struggle with how do you drive the leads? How do you drive new opportunities? How do you really put new business on the books? And that's one of the things that every organization is challenged with. So it's not just how do you bring also new business in, but it's also how do you prevent business from going out the door, right? So as a chief revenue officer, I'm constantly looking at what's coming in. So lead demand and lead generation, really super important, but it's also just as important. And I think a lot of companies struggle with it because they don't keep the eye on the ball, which is what's that business going out the door? $1 million in and $1 million out doesn't really look that great, right? So you've got to strike that fine balance. So it's really important to generate as much pipeline as you can and fill the funnel.
But I think it's we've all heard the cliche that it costs anywhere from 5 to 10 times more to secure new revenue than it does to keep existing revenue. And I think that one of the challenges is that in keeping the existing revenue, you've got to really take a hard look at, am I sticky? Is what I'm offering still uniquely valuable? Because eventually, if there's going to be any kind of displacement, it means that you have now fallen below what I would call the Maginot line. For those of you who don't know what that is, look it up. It's really it's very apropos. But to fall below the Maginot line, which basically says the pain of gain or the pain of change is no longer the thing that keeps me from switching and doing something else, right? So if my gain is significant, then I don't really care how much the pain of change is. I'm willing to go through it. But if the pain of change, it means that it's not the value that they're going to get going forward. If you haven't closed that value gap, if you're still not uniquely valuable, they're going to leave you.
Skip, I was just going to add to that point.
Yeah.
That is such a hot wire, especially and this is why collaboration across organizations and their business units is so critical. And I say this because as a chief revenue officer, I'm looking at, obviously, as we talked about, the top of the funnel, the business coming in the front door, but you have to also have your eye on customer success, making sure that the customer's happy, making sure they're seeing value in the product, and make sure you're gathering the feedback from the customer to understand what can we do better? What can we do differently? What's the next cutting edge thing that they could use? And making sure that that's also in the product for the future. And that's really the important piece is being able to listen to your customer, understand their needs, understand the value of what you're providing as a software vendor, and then also making sure that that feedback is going into your product. That keeps you out in front, and that keeps you out as being that global leader. But again, overall, it has to be getting that feedback and listening to the customer. So critical.
It's funny. I've read recently that companies are going away from net promoter score and they're moving more to customer satisfaction. And I think that one of the challenges with all of those disparate survey kinds of information is that you never really had a way to spot the insights, to spot the patterns, right? So an insight is really nothing more than the identification of pattern you never knew before, right? That's an insight. That's why it's an insight, right? But now let's say you take the net promoter score, okay? Then you take the usage by the customer. Then you take your own product roadmap and your own internals relative to that. Then you take a look at the market and you say, okay, now run all this together and tell me if my net promoter score is really 65, which is maybe good in an industry or bad, or my net promoter score is 65, but when weighted against the real world of what's going on, it's really a 40. And then where's my barrier to entry? Am I susceptible to displacement? And by whom? AI can answer all of that, but you've got to have somebody at the top that is asking the right questions.
So great point in terms of when I think about this, it's nothing but a vanity metric unless you're going to take action on it. And that's really important. The other piece of this, Skip, is, and every organization, I think, or I should say for the most part, they miss out on the fact that what's your vision? What's your 2 to 3 year vision, even in advance of gaining the feedback, the net promoter score? Because many companies are running around, there's a fine balance, because if that's all you're doing is looking at what the feedback is and changing on the dime immediately on the spot, you also need to make sure that you're constantly keeping track with what your 2 to 3 year vision was and where do you want to go. The one
Yeah.
thing you don't want to do is ultimately end up being, a hostage to, what's happening every little moment of the day. You have to keep your eye on the ball. Why are you in this business? What are you trying to solve for? What do you want to be when you grow up? And you really want to be able to kind of reverse engineer that plan and incorporate the new things of today, but always keep your eye on the ball. Net promoter score, gaining the feedback from your customers, from your partners, from everyone, and bringing that into what that vision has always been is really super important. So you're trying to pull it all together and balance it out and be able to make, obviously a great product.
Where you were just with, right, Terrace?
Yeah.
You were talking about, tell me, I think it's really cool about it, where AI is playing in the area of logistics.
Yeah.
And really logistics in what I called, maybe as much as 25 years ago when I was with Iconoculture and we were doing consumer trends and behavioral research, observational research. And one of the things that we determined early on as a macro trend is that people were becoming much, much more aware, and it became much more important to them to understand the total go-to-market value chain. Not just that what was the product that you're selling in the store, where was that product made? How was it made? How was it transported? Right. And they were looking at all of this and saying, what's the overall footprint of that particular product? And going, you know what? I love the taste of that
Right.
meat or whatever, but I don't like where it comes from. I'm going to go find an alternative. That's what you guys were doing, right? Was being able to help companies understand, here's the risk of your go-to-market value chain.
Absolutely. And what that looks like, I mean, it's constantly changing today. And the thing that what we're starting to see is with all of the events in the world that are happening, it's so important to understand, where are you getting all of your components for your product? Where are you getting your product from? Who's manufacturing it? I really don't want to know that there was a child in Zimbabwe, an 8-year-old, sewing, a part of my
Hmm.
clothing together. I don't want to find out later that a certain supplier of mine's been hacked 20 times. That puts me at risk. I don't want to find out that, there's a pattern of storms that come up across the supply chain. So it's really super important to understand what that is. It's a reflection of your business. It's a reflection of your product, and it's a reflection of, do you respect your customer? Because if your customer has a problem with it, then you should be able to pivot. You should have that flexibility, and your being able to leverage AI to see the trends, to see the patterns, to see what's happening within that supply chain. And that's really super critical.
Well, and now you can take social media and the news and everything else and saying, look, the reality is it's never a problem until it is, right? Well, wait a minute,
Exactly.
this was never a problem before, right? And all of
Right.
a sudden, the news media and social media got after it. And all of a sudden, what was never an issue is now an issue. And you got, so part of the monitoring has to be social media. What's social media saying about child labor? What's social media saying about climate change? What's social media saying about this? And more importantly, or just as importantly, how is that reflecting on us as a company? And then where is the next thing that's going to happen, right? If we follow the path, this may not be bothering us right now. This may not be a challenge for us right now, but this trend line about where this is becoming important in the consumer psyche is like, okay, this is going to be a problem for us in 6 months. So let's get out in front of this. And AI can do all of that for you in minutes.
It's not only can AI help you with the predictability, being proactive with what is happening from the events and what's happening in social. What are they saying about my product, about my company? How can I pivot? What's happening with my industry? That's really the super critical component. So every company, listen, Skip, 5, 10 years ago, no company actually had the ability to listen this closely to what they've been saying in social, our customers, the industry, so on and so forth, to be able to pivot. It took years before you even heard of what they're saying so that you could make that necessary adjustment. But nowadays, social is so critical to everything that we do. And you have to have that ear to the ground, if you will, to be able to pivot. AI is that critical component to all of this. Not only is it giving you that predictability, and it's giving you the ability, and it will take action for you and
Right.
assign out what, when it sees an
Yep.
event, it'll sign out, hey, we see it, we see the pattern, let's get in front of it. And then, by the way, who within the employee base or what business unit should immediately react? That's immediate response time, which is like collapsing major time frames, which really truly impacts a company's business.
Well, it's interesting, seeking alpha in the marketing and sales realm, if you will, is basically closing the gap between causation and correlation,
Yeah.
right? And so I think there's a correlation, but is there a causation, right? And everything has now become the butterfly effect, right? The old thing of if the butterfly flaps its wings in Venezuela and we get a hurricane here in the United States, there is that ability now to make that determination. So let's, and I also think what's important is a guy, some executive, marketing executive from P&G a long time ago said, if you can see the trend line, you're already too late.
Bingo.
And I think I
Bingo.
think that is so
1000%.
critical today, to your point, and that is you got to get out in front of it now, because if you wait and take your, if you take old line decision making process and apply it against the technology today, you're going to lose. You've got to
Bingo.
change how you think about change. You got to change how you think about change moving forward, especially if you're an executive. All right. So let's take this and move it around specifically then to the sales side. What changes have you seen, if any, in how you evaluate salespeople or new salespeople today than maybe even if you're going to be hiring, than maybe you did even 3 years ago?
So much has changed. The days that when we were doing it, Skip, it was, you got your list of accounts, you picked up the phone and the old, pick up the phone and start dialing and figure out what your talk track was. And you didn't even have the access to the research that you can do today. Everything, there's so much data at your fingertips before, you go into a call. But what I'm looking for when I think about the sales folks, there's so much of the new generation that's relying on technology, right? And I feel as if the ability to communicate one-on-one to build the relationship is going the way as the dodo. I mean, I really do believe
Hmm.
that we're relying so much on, Slack and texting and email versus building a relationship, understanding, what that driver is for Skip to, make a decision and understanding who he is in the sense that, if I go into your office, I can look on your walls and see that your daughter is a horseback rider and that you like the New York Giants. I'm so sorry to hear that. But you go through and you start to kind of look and now you can adjust like the conversation to what it is that allows you to communicate with that particular customer. In today's world, I don't see that happening. I don't see, and I see a lot of folks relying on, a reminder from technology. I used to write it down with a pencil and a calendar. I don't understand why they couldn't do that today. Now
Good.
where we are is where I think it's more of the new generation of selling. You want them just to be open to not only the new ways, and we need to be open to them as well, obviously, and adjust, but it's also open to the idea of what it is to talk to someone, have the personal relationship, strike that up, go out to the office, as we say, shake hands, kiss babies, and, feet on the street, face in the place. And that's really critical. And I don't see that happening today. But the sales reps that I see that are combining both of them are the most successful. And I'm looking for that hungry salesperson that hasn't bought their first BMW, and they're really hungry and they really want it and they want to learn and they're out there. And I think AI is allowing, when you think about the 20% of really great salespeople, it's the 80% that are good, they're average. I think with AI, you're going to be able to bring those 80% up closer to the 20%, and you're really going to have a super solid sales team at
Well,
that point.
yeah, the flip side of that, I think, is you're going to find when I was managing salespeople, I had the 10-40-50 rule. And that was 10% of the salespeople just needed me to move stuff out of the way. They were self-motivated. They had the knowledge. They
Yep.
were going to go. They just needed me to move stuff out of the way. The bottom 50% were either the ones that were brand new or they weren't catching on very quickly. And they just, they were probably going to churn. Then you have the middle 40%. The middle 40% is who got my time, my proactive time, with just a little bit of education, a little bit of motivation, right? They were going to be able to spend. And I tell my salespeople, you have to earn my time as your sales manager. If I've got 25 salespeople, I don't have time for everybody. So you have to earn my time. And the way that you earn my time is I gave very specifically, here's what you've got to be able to demonstrate. But even with that, what you have to recognize is that dynamic, that segmentation, right, is not static, it's dynamic. So where a lot of my time was spent was, is there a 10%er that's now acting like a 50%er? Is there a 50%er that has actually moved up to the 40%? And when they moved from 40 and they moved to 10, you and I will remember it, but Billy Martin was a great baseball manager and he kept getting fired. The reason was Billy Martin was brought in to change the culture of a team. And therefore, what happens is he changed people. He changed who you are, right? What the problem for Billy Martin was Billy Martin kept treating people that he had changed as people he hadn't changed. And so that new superstar that he had wound up coaching and mentoring and everything else, wait a minute, Billy, don't talk to me that way. I'm not that person. I don't have to get beat up anymore. So he kept getting fired, right? And I think that as a sales manager, you've got to recognize the change that's happening in your people, right? And you've got to be able to recognize, I've got to be able to treat them differently and then recognize there are those that are just going to continue to churn, period.
Skip, I also think there's a component that a lot of folks miss when they're looking at new sales reps and so on and so forth. And I think it's trying to understand who they are, right? Where do they come from? Chris Lee of old, early on when I was selling, you couldn't stop me because I was a kid. My background was youngest of five, growing up with nothing. And you and I talked about this. It's, when I looked at this, it was, you don't fear the bottom, right? Because you came from the bottom, and that's all you want is to be able to have those things you never had. So you will go through walls. You will listen to anyone. If you can tell me I'm going to make $1 million, if I just go in that direction, I'm going in that direction. I trust you. And it's that level of trust of your leadership, and it's understanding who the person is and where they come from. And if you can strike a balance with that and ignite that background, if someone could say to me, Chris, I'm going to make you even stronger and better who you are, and a combination of me not fearing that bottom, not having a safety net, wow, you're going to have someone that's going to really light it up. And that's that combination that you need to try to look for.
We also have now, which I think is interesting, and you and I chatted about this originally as well. We now have 5 different generations in the workplace. 5, right? So there's mature, boomer, Gen X, Gen Z, and then whatever the last one is, Gen Y or because they were always asking why, right? It's like my 3-year-old grandson. But because of that, here's the situation. I think, number one, I believe ageism is real. Okay. I'm 68 years old. Nobody was going to hire me, so I started my own gig. Okay. That's not really the primary reason, but secondary. But there are a lot of 68-year-olds that still have got a lot to give. And if a company is hiring thinking that I'm going to have somebody for 10 years, then they're freaking stupid. And it's like 1990 called and they said they want their strategy back, right? That's just ridiculous. You get out of them what you can get out of them for as long as you can get out of them. And so now it's about how quickly can I ramp? Give me somebody like you and me who doesn't have to know everything in order to move the ball forward in a sales cycle, and I'll take that one, right? But now what you've got is you got somebody that is going to be 30 something. They're going to be managing a mature, or a mature or a boomer has got to manage somebody that's a Gen Z. Okay. And to your point, you really got to understand who that person is, and your job, your EQ, right, has got to really be maybe the number one criteria in being able to manage and motivate and lead salespeople today, right?
I can tell you that two things. One is the ageism, absolutely. And I do think that interesting thing with AI is that the reason why folks are saying, hey, those 1990 sales reps are going out and, they should be moved into retirement. It's actually leveraging AI now. It's the reason why they didn't see the value was because they don't have the ability to prepare. They didn't understand all the technology. AI can do that for you in advance and plan your week and understand what you
If
said
you'll
on the
embrace
call.
it,
And here's
if
exactly.
you'll embrace it.
You embrace it. If you embrace it. Also think, Skip, we talked about the different generations, as you were saying, is like, hey, there's 5 generations here, but it's also, I think, the challenge for a lot of companies are that you're moving folks into leadership just because you feel as if, okay, it's time, right? They've earned it. They've been here for a few years. They've had some success in sales, but there's really no training to be a leader, right? In sales. So a lot of folks go in and say, hey, this is my way. I'm going to try to push my way on everyone, but you can't put that over top of all those generations and assume they're going to be successful. So somewhere, someone needs to provide that training ground so that person can be, you're doing them both a disservice. You're doing the company a disservice and the individual a disservice, moving them in without giving them some type of training, some type of knowledge on how to be a leader.
Well, and expectations is the most powerful word and the most dangerous word in the history of the English language, right? It's powerful because once you set expectations, and if you're not, by the way, this is internal as well as external selling. If you are not setting expectations, they are being set for you. You're just not being told about them, and that's when problems happen. And by the way, I've been happily afraid of my wife for 35 years, and I'm going to tell you right now, it is the unspoken expectations
Right.
that are at the root of darn near every single conversation or every single argument we have. Right?
Right.
It's really, honey.
Right.
I'm sorry. I'm supposed to know that how,
Right.
which is, by the way, not a good statement to make to your wife. But my point is that it's all about the expectations, right?
Yeah.
So set up the expectations. Here's your goal. Here are the tools. I believe all companies are really managed on 3 primary pillars: time, tools, and talent. How much time do we have to hit our goal? Do we have the talent to do it? And does the talent have the tools that they need to do it with? And if you make every management decision based upon those 3 pillars, everything is fine. Money is the overall umbrella, right?
Yes.
Everybody says, well, I don't have money. Well, then you got to figure out a way. That's why you're in management. But I think that it's important that we recognize, especially the higher up the organization, we recognize that we've got very, very different people in our organizations than we used to have.
Yeah.
And if we get people that are productive for 3 and 4 and 5 years, then that's great. Here's the other thing too. If I get somebody that has stayed with me for 5 years, I better have a career path for them. Or when they leave, they're not going to be happy about it. Give me somebody in a sales role that has been with the company and seeding things for 3 years. There's your person that you think you maybe want to have in management, or maybe not, right? And by the way, that's the biggest mistake people make, is taking my best salesperson and thinking they can replicate it. That's why Michael Jordan never made a good coach, because he's, come on, the GOAT is not going to make it happen. So, because nobody's going to work like he does, right? Is kind of the situation.
Yeah.
So having said all of that, I think that when you look to hire, you said, I'm looking for somebody who's hungry. I love the fact that I'd like to have somebody that's been at the bottom, because I know they'll do anything to keep from going back there again. Totally get that. Fear and debt are the 2 greatest motivators for a salesperson. And so I think that now has changed. But I also think that, you mentioned, we talked about this a lot actually in our previous conversation. I think that there is an element, and I'm working on in my book right now. I'm working on my book, Everybody Sells, From Cookies to Close. And one of the chapters is going to be on the element of likability. And I think that is really overlooked right now in how do I assess likability? If I can get as smart as the next guy, if I can make sure that I am as efficient as the next woman, if I can make sure that I am as energetic as anybody else, then and I can get that conversation, right? It's all about getting that first conversation. The thing that differentiates you from anybody else, the thing that gets you a longer conversation or the next conversation more than anything else, is, did I like talking to you?
Yes.
So I think likability and the ability to assess likability, and you almost have to assess it. I don't know if it can be trained or not. where if it's fake, then is it really likability? It's more manipulation. I think the ability to assess that is something that's maybe more important than anything else now.
So, and I've always said this, it's people buy from people. At the bottom line, it's people buy from people. They buy from people they trust. They buy from folks that they know they'll be in the foxhole with them. When the times are good, great. It's when the times are bad, are they going to be there? And you have to understand and feel comfortable knowing that you're making a decision on $1 million software. Is that person going to be there when it fails? Is that person going to be there to try to help you make sure it's successful? And
Hmm.
they're all the things that you want to ask in advance, but it's also understanding who it is that you're talking to even before you get on the call, and understand that, hey, they're like, they like this, they prefer this, and you get to understand who they are as a person, so you have some type of commonality in that conversation. One of the
Hmm.
things I'll mention, Skip, as an example, it's really, really interesting. When I was at Siebel Systems, we had more products for CRM than you can shake a stick at. Unbelievable. And then when we went to Salesforce, it was a different dynamic of the way we sold. Was selling a simple product, easy to use. We were driving in at exactly what the market needed. But yet the salespeople that Mark was hiring, Mark Benioff and Jim Steele, the head of sales, was people that were likable in the sense that they could have a conversation. They knew that their product didn't do it all, but they knew that those folks would be there with them through thick and thin. And that's the reason why you had we didn't even have 80% of the features that Siebel had, but we were still taking the business away from
Hmm.
them because we could understand who it is that we were selling to, and they trusted us.
It's funny. Mark Benioff was just on a podcast, I guess, recently, and he said the number one skill that he had to learn after all the success and everything else that he had done, the number one skill was selling.
Yeah.
That was the thing that it was ultimately became the most important thing, because no matter what I was doing, no matter what I had to build or what I had to manage or what I had to fix or whatever, it all came down to being able to sell effectively. And if
Yeah.
I'm not out there selling, then I'm not really doing my job.
No, and you need, and Mark was a great leader in that, and the fact that he had no problems going out and understanding what the needs were that we were trying to solve for and trying to get out in front of them. I love the fact also that what Mark used to do was, he would obviously have an unbelievable vision and then reverse engineer back to what we needed to do, how to get there. But what Mark did, which was so priceless, was he would at least come out with, here's something else that we want to do, and it would shake up the entire industry. Whether or not we were actually going to do it or not do it, it was amazing because it was like, oh my God, they're going to try to replace all the Bloomberg terminals. And then everyone starts to raise up and scream and yell at her. But it was something we never really did. But wow, what marketing, man. Everyone knew about us. And we were a little company that was
That's
just,
it.
telling them this is what we were thinking of doing. And we were shaking the tree. But that's what I loved about Salesforce and Mark, was that he was constantly thinking about, how do we talk about, we are going left when everyone else is going right? How do we become different? How do we constantly change and not get comfortable with who we are? It goes back to those paradigm shifts and being able to
Hmm.
be adaptable as you're going through each one of those phases. And that's what Mark has done so well. And it's been so priceless as to what Salesforce has done in that way.
Question. Do you remember a time when Salesforce was punished because some wild idea that Mark had never really came to fruition?
Wow. I don't know if I necessarily would say punished as much as it it may have shaken the trust a little bit, right? It's like,
Of
you
the
know,
market or internally?
just the market, right? Of like,
Okay.
wait a second, like how far can you go here? Like it was great to talk about like replacing a Bloomberg terminal way back when,
Right.
but it did shake it up, but then it kind of scratched your head and go, wait a second, what direction are you all over the place, or do you really have a direction? But again, it was striking that fine balance of, wow, what great marketing that we get. No such thing as bad, publicity, but it was giving a little bit of the, well, are they on the right path? But Mark again was able to quickly use that as an advantage and pivot on, hey, we're constantly thinking of different things. Thanks for your feedback. And it was like, again, we didn't even think about it, but thanks for your feedback. We're not going to go in that direction. And then leading on, that's why we're listening.
I'm wondering if you're the David going after the Goliath, if maybe a underutilized tactic would be for the CEO to go out periodically, podcast, because I'm one in a billion right now, and just say something provocative, but couch it with, I wonder what if, and then you have an
Skip,
idea. Okay.
skip.
And I want
No,
what?
no, go, go. We're going
No,
down the
I
same path.
wonder what if, and all of a sudden you're covering yourself because you're not saying you're going to go do it, but you're basically doing market research by throwing some stuff up against the wall that's kind of maybe weird or whatever, and go, I wonder what if, right? Now, your marketing department, your PR department, they've got one job, and that is to make sure that everybody in the freaking world hears what you just said. They're not trying to sell it. They're not trying to do anything. You're just trying to get some reaction of what's that. But I think that that's really underutilized. I think that there's so many CEOs that if they've got that grand vision, and
Yeah,
let me if Elon Musk, he's an
yep,
easy target. But if
yeah,
Elon Musk came out and said, I think that there's an opportunity for everybody to beat the stock market. And I know that AI can do it, and I'm going to do it. I think there's an opportunity. Everybody can make money up or down. Everybody can make money beating the stock market, and I believe that AI can do that. If he were just to go out and say that, which he does, and he has
yeah,
before, right? My question is, does he get punished? And I don't think he does. So you take it on a much smaller scale, and a CEO in a particular industry that's solving a particular problem, who happens to think that they see around the corner of a problem that maybe, which is what I did early on
yeah,
in my career. It was all about, you don't know that you had this problem, but let me share with you why you have it. And they go, okay, now let me share with you we're the product to buy in order
yep.
to solve that problem. I don't know. What do you? I just think it's an underutilized tactic.
Skip, I've been trying to push this with every CEO I've worked with outside of Mark Benioff. Mark is absolutely right. Keith Kroc did it as well at DocuSign, and is
Mhm.
just kind of jumping out in front and talking about, hey, here's what we want to do. He talked more about, when we talked about e-signature and everyone was focused on that, he was talking about how, he was pivoting and saying how much we were saving, the rainforest from cutting down trees. I mean, he took a different pivot on that, and here's what we're going to do. But I will tell you that it's, again, this goes back to Mark's world of art of
Hmm.
the possible. It's not saying we're definitely doing it, but think about the art of the possible. Think about if we could do this. Imagine if you will. But that's the type of CEO and leader you want, because they do see around quarters. They are constantly thinking about the next step. They are thinking, and it's only going to make you as a customer and a vendor use it, and a company using the product, is that you know that you're constantly going to be changing. You're always going to get better. You're never going to be stagnant in 1990s software, and here it is in 2026. You're going to actually be able to say, hey, it's been living and growing with me as I've had it, and constantly changing. And that's the great thing. But to your point, that marketing piece is missing. I think a lot of CEOs play it really close to the vest and are afraid of what could be done. It's those CEOs that are having fun with what they do. They're serious about making sure that they want to be a global leader, but they're not also taking themselves so serious that they can't, have some fun with it as well, and also grab some of that market share at the same time.
Well, there's no look. If you've got a CEO that can generate a global has a global microphone, or could, right?
Yeah.
And then you're not going to get any better customer or market feedback than to go out there and just lay it out there and just see what the response is, right? And you'll get a pretty good indication as to whether or not you need to never mention that again, or
Right.
whether it's something you need to go ahead and move internally.
Skip, I'm
So,
really shocked that there's so many companies today that have CEOs that almost refuse to leave the ivory tower, right? They don't want to come in unless there's really an issue. And it's those CEOs that are rolling up the sleeves. And I don't care if you're a $1 million company, a 50 million, 100 million, 250 million, you should always be out there with your sleeves rolled up and ready to get dirty with the rest of them, and be willing to be front and center and take it on the chin if there's a problem. But again, it's getting the feedback and being real. If there's a problem and it's a product that I'm selling, I want to know about it. I want to fix it. I want to make you
right.
happy. And I want to be honest and say, maybe we didn't sell you the right tool, or we didn't give you the right value prop to it. But that's the thing today. It shocks me a little bit, but it's those successful companies that have those CEOs that are more proactive, to your point.
Well, failure isn't fatal until you stop.
Right.
Right?
Exactly.
Where there's time, there's hope. All right, let me ask you a question. What's the biggest mistake you've made as you've helped build these companies and so forth. What's the one thing if you're talking to a sales rep, you're talking to a head of sales, don't
Yeah.
do this.
Yeah, I think there's this world of which every salesperson believes I have built a better mousetrap of how to sell. And if you're successful, it gets a little scary because suddenly you think, wow, I can just take this and I can give it to everyone and I should be a leader. And a lot of folks get out of sales too soon. There's so much that there's still to learn. There's so much that there's going to be adjustments and like we said, paradigm shifts that you want to be a part of. So you want to see how you can adapt to those and pivot to those and adjust. And you want to be able to really give yourself that chance to grow. And I think a lot of sales folks are jumping in too soon. And then it's like you're babysitting other sales reps versus actually leading them. And again, it gets back a little bit of the training. And I think it's a little bit about getting in too prematurely as a leader. And I think that's something that we should really keep an eye on in every organization. And even to myself, I think I jumped in too soon. I would have liked to have continued to kind of do a little bit more learning in terms of getting myself acclimated, maybe even other products and different software. But again, it's looking back in hindsight, I would probably give that as a advice is to like, hey, just be conscious of you don't have to immediately get there. Time will dictate that to you and you'll know when. It'll be in your bones. You don't have to force it.
It's great. That is excellent. Chris, this has been an excellent, excellent
Yeah.
conversation. It's a little bit different because I think we got more strategic. We got
Yeah.
more into the esoteric side of what AI is meaning to everything
Yeah.
and sales. You know, you've been there, you've done that. And now I mean, I wish you Godspeed on the next chapter.
Thank you.
But I think there's a lot of good things that can that will come out of this podcast. So I thank you very much.
Thank you, Skip. And I'll just say, hey, this was been a great conversation. And one of the things that I do want to highlight before we wrap this call as well is,
Mhm.
when you and I were having the earlier conversations, the one thing I really respected about what your vision was and your view was kind of in line with mine, which is we get to a point in our careers where it's really not our drivers are a little bit different, right? It goes from, hey, I want to get that first BMW. Hey, I want to get this for the family. I want to get material things. But then you get to a part of the career in our lives. And it was great when I heard you say it too, which is like, it's more important to give back and it's more important to help others in the new generation become successful, remove some of the barriers, make the world a better place as you are kind of winding our careers down. And I think that was really something that hit home with me when we got off the call was really hearing someone that genuinely is there building a podcast, building a conversation so that you can help the next generation. You can let them see things forward. And I can tell you right now, I haven't really seen that in a lot of the podcasts I've been on, but man, this has been a really great conversation. And I love who you are and what you're about and why you're doing it. So kudos to you. And I really appreciate you inviting me on this call. Thank you so
Well,
much.
thank you, Chris. I appreciate that. Look, as you have experienced as well, there were a lot of people that helped me along the way.
Same.
And so I'm just paying it forward. And I hope that what I'm really demonstrating to those that are following me is what it feels like and what it means to just pay
Yeah.
it forward. You don't have to wait
Yeah.
to be my age. You can start paying it forward. And actually, Andy Roddick said that the best advice he ever got from Andre Agassi was don't wait till you retire to start giving back. Start
Oh,
giving
that's
back
awesome.
right now. And I
Yeah.
think that that is so true. Thank you so much for your kind words. And hopefully, this will continue to resonate with people, and we will continue to move forward.
So thank you so much for having me.